Greetings, Flosstube. It has been a dog's age since I actually did an official Flosstube video, but since we all have copious amounts of time on our hands now, not only have I been stitching more this year than I did in all of last year combined so far, but I do have time to make a video. Got a little bit of a new setup. I'm using an old iPad that my husband had at work that wasn't in use, so he brought it home for me to try. And I think that this will probably be a lot easier to use. We're going to see. I don't know. I've never really used an iPad. I'm lucky to have my Android phone, but we'll see how this goes. Greetings, everyone. It is March 30th, 2020. It is 9:19 a.m. and coming to you from the damp, wet environs of Sunderland, Massachusetts. We actually had some interesting thunderstorms last night. I was working on some letter writing, and Bill was working on the computer, and we turned and looked at each other, and he's like, "Was that thunder?" I was like, "I was going to ask you the same thing." So the weather's interesting. I mean, it's getting a little warmer, so I think that probably had something to do with it. But, you know, we're just like everybody else, trying to make the best of this COVID-19 weirdness. We're staying healthy. Pretty much everyone we know has stayed healthy. The only person who's gotten sick during this whole thing was my mother-in-law, and she had a stroke due to undetected AFib, which they've got her on heart medication for now. Thankfully, the response from the EMTs and the emergency room doctors was amazing. And they were able to get her treated and get her stabilized before it got too bad. She actually hasn't suffered any of the ill effects you associate with a stroke. She didn't have any paralysis. She didn't have any vision impairment and speech impairment, anything like that. It's almost like it never happened. But she did have a blood clot. She was in the hospital for 3 days. The sad thing was, with all this COVID stuff, my father-in-law being 77 years old, he wasn't allowed to stay with her. So I felt really, really bad for both of them in the beginning stages of it when they were both scared to death and didn't know what was going on. Fortunately, she's back to her old self. They gave her a 3-month prescription, I think, of the medication that she's going to need to take for her heart now. You know, I'm just grateful that it went as well as it did, because a few years ago now, I guess it was 2016, I think, Bill's dad had a major stroke and had vision impairment for about 6 months. He lost vision in his left eye for about 6 months, and he gradually got it back. But fortunately, she's not having to deal with anything like that. You know, other than that, we've all been healthy and doing well. And I'm just very thankful for the miracle that we got with that. And when it happened, I said, I wonder if she has a heart condition that, you know, she didn't know about, because let's face it, there's a reason why heart problems are called silent killers. You don't know until something bad happens, usually, that you had a heart condition in the first place. You know, strokes or things like that. And, you know, I guess maybe I'm more in tune to it because my husband works for a football team, and they always do EKGs on kids to make sure that they're in good heart health to be able to play. And there was this kid who was recruited to play basketball at UMass a couple years ago, and just as part of the routine physical procedure that he had to go through, he found out that he had such a severe heart condition. It was a miracle he was alive at 18. Never mind the fact that playing basketball could kill him. I mean, they found out that he had such a severe, rare heart condition that he was lucky to be alive, you know, and to have made it out of his teens. So, you know, those kind of things are really scary. I'm just grateful that my mother-in-law now knows she has AFib and she can take medication to help with that. So, thankfully, she's doing well. The rest of us, we're just riding out this coronavirus thing. I mean, it's weird. Spring practice has been canceled. Of course, everything related to university life has been shut down. So for the first time in Bill's career, he doesn't have anything going on this time of year. And it's kind of like, wait a minute, who are you? Why are you here? But selfishly, I'm enjoying the free time I'm having with him. But I think it's getting to him more than it gets to me, because since 2018, when I lost my job, I've been doing temp work. So I have had stretched out periods of downtime that I didn't necessarily want between jobs, but it's helped me get used to this. I was temping at the DOR until the governor shut down the state, basically. And I will be again, and I think that things will be very busy. I think the assignment will probably end up being stretched out longer than they thought it would be, simply because with all the courts being closed and the Child Support Enforcement Agency being backlogged as it is, I should be fine to have my job probably at least through the end of the summer. But I'm more used to enforced downtime, or forced downtime, I should say. My husband isn't. He's only missed one day of work in 20 years. That was a couple of years ago when he had a virus, that he had a fever, and I'm like, you're green, you're not going to work. And I kind of forced him to stay home. He's been to work with diverticulitis pain. He's been to work with a softball-sized hematoma on his leg that he got injured on the job, and he was at work on crutches for a few days until he got to where he could walk without crutches. So I mean, this is a guy who never slows down when it comes to work. So I think he's a little more stir crazy than I am right now, but we're just enjoying our time together and trying to get out, take walks when we can, when the weather cooperates. And we've been watching a lot of movies, and he's been writing a lot, and I've been cross-stitching. Which brings me to the point of the video. We're 6 minutes and 40 seconds in, and I haven't shown you a thing. I'm not going to show you all my whips, because that would probably take 3 days of filming, and you'd get bored inside of 5 minutes. But I wanted to show you the ones that I'm primarily focusing on this year. It seems like every time something happens, I start a new whip, which is not a good thing. Or maybe it is. Like I said, the only piece I've ever... Or did I say it? No. This is like the 4th time I've tried to record this on the iPad. I think I said it previous. Like I mentioned, last year was a really bad year, so I didn't do a lot of stitching. Actually, I went through a long period where I couldn't even look at anything I was stitching. I just wasn't feeling it. For various reasons that were pretty intense and severe, and I didn't get back to stitching again until I started working on a project for Stephanie Powers in honor of her work with her Wildlife Foundation in Kenya, and in memory of William Holden, who she was involved with for about 10 years before he passed away. And somehow just having that connection, I was inspired to stitch The Alphabet Zoo by Belinda Carls Nace, which was published by Blue Ribbon Designs. I got into watching Heart to Heart last year. I vaguely remember watching it with my family when I was a kid, but I was 5 when it premiered. I mean, I'm 45 now, and the show just celebrated its 40th anniversary, so I don't really remember watching it in real time. I know my parents did, and I remember I remember vague snippets of being a kid and watching it with my parents, but I just got back into watching it again, and I became probably a little bit obsessive with the show, and with Robert Wagner and Stephanie Powers, and I listened to her memoir, and it was really a memoir. It wasn't so much about her acting career as it was about the adventures that she's had, whether it was on her own with her mother or with William Holden when they were together. And she wrote it at a time, poor thing, she was diagnosed with lung cancer when her mother was dying, basically, and her mother died, and then a week and a half later she had major surgery to combat this cancer, and she was inspired to write the book by going through all her mother's personal effects and reading her journals and things, and realizing that the things that she shared with her mother and the places she went with her mother weren't even necessarily places that still exist nowadays. because a lot of her journeys took her around the world in the 60s before things became what they are today. And so she felt moved to write this memoir. And it just really touched me. I would never have said before last year that I have a favorite book because I love to read too much. But her memoir, it's my favorite book now. I've listened to it twice on Audible. I need to get a copy of it. I'm hoping to go to Burbank. I was supposed to go with my husband in May to, I guess you would call it like a nostalgia convention, but she and Robert Wagner were both going to be there, and I wanted to go to see them. And I was going to buy a copy of her book from her to support the foundation. And, you know, I mean, it just, there aren't enough words for me to say how much she inspires me. And maybe it was because I was in a really rough patch in my life, but she's my role model now. She's been through so much in her life, so many ups and downs. I mean, people were getting all like, oh, well, you know, like when they canceled the Hollywood show, and people like me were saying we were disappointed it wasn't going to happen. And people were like, well, you know, they were trying to insinuate you didn't care about the fact that she's 77 and Robert Wagner's 90. And I'm like, no, I don't want them to get sick. I'm sad I don't get to see them now. And I came down to it and I said, look, woman has had dengue fever, hepatitis, cancer 4 times. I think she's going to be able to get through the coronavirus thing fine, you know. But, you know, she's just really an inspiration to me. And so if you scroll back through the video, through my list of videos, 2 videos back is the video that my lovely friend Jane took when Bill and I were in New York City last year to see Miss Powers in a really cool play. It was really cool, but that's a subject for a different video. She took a video of me giving the cross-stitch to her, and it was the most surreal moment of my life, especially when she said, well, you know, I'm going to Kenya, and if there's any way I can get this there with me, I'll take it with me and display it in the education center. And then I was just like, one of my cross-stitch pieces, and I do have it on good authority since then, that she has gotten it to Kenya, and it's like one of my cross-stitch pieces is on another continent. I mean, that just, it's still after all this time. I mean, it was November 30th when I met her. You know, still after all this time, it hasn't sunk in yet. And Bill and I were talking about it last night, and I said, you know, I almost think of the game ranch and the foundation and the education center is almost like a sacred space. And that might be overstating it a little, but if you think about it and you listen to her book and you realize how much William Holden meant to her and how much conservation meant to him, as she's always saying in every interview I've ever heard, he was a conservationist before it became a thing to be a conservationist, because he started the game ranch in the early 60s when people were still, you know, raping and pillaging the land and not really giving a crap about it. You know, to me, it almost makes that particular place sacred because it's about something bigger than everybody who's involved with it, including all the people who donate to keep it going. So, yeah, I mean, it's really almost overwhelming if I allow myself to think of it that way, is I've got cross stitches in other states. I mean, I've made gifts for friends, and I'm still making things for people that I'm sending to different states, but I've never, in my wildest dreams, would have thought that I would have a piece of my cross stitch, which by default is a piece of my heart, because not everybody gets a cross stitch from me. You have to be pretty special to me to get a cross stitch from me. That a piece of my heart is in Kenya. I mean, it's still, wow. It still completely floors me. But if you want to see, that video, just scroll back a couple in my video list, and it's in there. And she nearly had me in tears. I mean, I was so nervous about meeting her anyway, but I shouldn't have been, because she just has this way of putting you at ease where you feel like you've known her your whole life, even if you just met her like 2 minutes ago, which was the case with me. To the point where I like put my arm around her shoulder and I'm like internally screaming at myself, like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you being so familiar? She's a celebrity. What's your blankety blank such and such problem? But she didn't care. But I was like having this internal monologue with myself about, what the hell are you doing, woman? Why are you being so familiar with a famous person? But she didn't care. And she was just as blown away by the cross stitch as I was by meeting her. So anyway, it's going on 15 minutes now, and I haven't shown any cross stitch. So my apologies to those people who don't like that kind of talky video. But so anyway, I'm going to show you the few projects that I'm working on that are kind of in my current WIP rotation. It doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the number of projects I've got going on right now, but I thought that I could just show you the main ones that hopefully in the coming weeks, and who knows, maybe months if this tracks on too much longer, hopefully I can show you the progress that I've made, and get back into doing a more regular Flosstube video compilation. Let's see here. First off, this is one that I am making for a friend who has a long-haired dachshund named Josh. And I had told her I would try to find a pattern and stitch one for her because she had wanted something that I stitched. She thinks my stitching is really whatever. I mean, she gives me far too much credit. But anyway, she wanted a stitched piece, and I told her, well, if I can find a dachshund, would you like a dachshund because of Josh? And she said yes, and then I started looking, and I couldn't really find a pattern that I liked that looked like Josh. So one day I was on the White Willow Stitching website, or I guess I had gone to, I was on a website dedicated to White Willow Stitching, and I wasn't even looking for a dachshund at that point. I think I was looking at the dragons, and all of a sudden I scrolled past this, and it was perfect. It's the long-haired dachshund, designed by, it's from Tamara Burnett's artwork, charted by Jamie Larson. And this is Josh. Josh is just a little bit older, so he's gray, but he's kind of getting gray. But so this is the piece I'm going to stitch for my friend in honor of her little sweet puppy. And I don't admittedly have much of this done yet. This is a piece of fabric flare. I don't remember what the name of this one was, but it was just a real pretty, fabric flare is hand-painted fabrics, and they're very unique. As you can see, I've gotten Josh's nose and his upper lip done. It's going to be a lot of black stitching, but fortunately this fabric, it's a 32 count. But it's very easy to stitch on. I'm not sure why that is, but it's really easy to stitch on, so it's going to go quickly. Basically what it boils down to is having enough time to just sit down and stitch. But now with coronavirus, I've got all the time in the world, so I should make some progress on this in the next few weeks. But that's his nose. It takes 8 skeins of DMC 310, and the rest of the colors are just 1. So I'm probably going to get really tired of stitching black things by the time I finish this. But it was just the perfect pattern. Like I said, I wasn't even looking for a dachshund at that particular point, but I found it. That's Josh. That's Josh to a T. He's just a little older than this little model puppy was when he got turned into a cross-stitch pattern. So that's one that I'm going to work on. I'm having fun doing that one because it's kind of cool seeing his face take shape. I mean, I'm like, oh, he's got a nose now. He's got a nose and an upper lip. And he'll eventually have a face. I've just got to take the time to stitch him. And so the next one I'm planning to work on is my color conversion of the Long Dog Sampler Rain Dance. And this pattern just spoke to me because I'm a flute player, And Kokopelli is a Native American god of music. I believe he's Hopi Indian. Correct me if I'm wrong, Native Americans out there, but I believe he's Hopi Indian. He's from the desert Southwest anyway. And not only is he the god of music, but he's the god of fertility. So my husband jokes around that, gee, Barry White's been around a lot longer than we gave him credit for. Just proving that music and sex have gone together since ancient times, I suppose. But, so this is the pattern. I did a color conversion. I'm using Weeks Dye Works and Gentle Arts sampler threads, just because I wanted to see what they would look like in this piece. I'm stitching it on a piece of 18 count Aida in the Toasted Almond colorway, which I got from Hand Dyed by Stephanie. And I don't even remember what I originally bought this fabric for, but I just decided, it was actually last December 1st. It was when we got back from New York, and there ended up being a blizzard. We got back in New York, from New York, just in the nick of time. We were driving through Connecticut when there were a few snow flurries, and we got back, turned in the rental car, went to the grocery store, and by the time we got home, the crap had hit the fan. And so I had a snow day start on December 1st. I started this one. Now, I haven't done all that much with it, but it is one of my planned whips to work on in my rotation for the immediate future, what I'm calling my coronavirus rotation, because I've got a lot of time to stitch. This is what I've gotten done. I've gotten the Thunderbird and the little Starburst and a little bit of the border. I put in just enough of the border so that I could start the pattern, because I really wanted to stitch that Thunderbird. So this is what I've stitched, is the little upper left-hand corner of the pattern. I've done that, and then I'm working on the tail of this bigger Thunderbird. And what I have decided I'm going to do, because there's a lot of fill patterns, what I'm going to do with these particular motifs, the iguana, the turtle, the aardvark, and the birds down here, and even probably the Thunderbirds here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch the black outlines and then fill in the colors, just because it'll be a nice mixture of counting and focused stitching and then mindless stitching when I'm filling in the colors. So as you can see, I've already started filling in the color on the Thunderbird's tail there. So that's how I'm going to approach it. That's how I approached it with the Starburst, and with this guy here, I stitched all the black and then filled in the gray, and I filled in the yellow and the tan on that one. I just think it's a good approach, because like I said, it'll be the perfect, and I'm wrangling a half yard of fabric. It's not my first rodeo with a really big piece of fabric, but it makes it interesting to try to stitch. And I will show you another piece in a minute that is also on a big piece of fabric that it's like wrestling a bear sometimes, because you're in the middle of the fabric and you're trying to fold it and all that, but it works out fine. So hopefully I will have some more progress on this the next time I shoot a video to show you. This one is a really nice quick stitch too. It's just like everything else, having the time to work on it. So there's that one. But like I said, coronavirus is the great equalizer. We're all screwed, so we might as well make something of it, right? So that's all that's in that bag, or those two projects. Now, the next piece. My goddaughter will be 3 in May 11th. She'll be 3 years old. I still have not done a birth sampler for this child. She'll be getting married by the time I finish at this rate. I don't remember how far back it was in my Flosstube videos. It was probably among one of the very first ones where I showed the Jennifer Aikman Smith Dragon Welcome that I was stitching. That was an actual birth sampler. But for some reason, over time, since I started that one, and I probably started that one 2 years ago, I'd have to pull it out and check the chart, but I just fell out of favor with it, which bothers me because I love Jennifer Aikman Smith's, I love the Dragon Dreams patterns, and I love her pieces, but I just wasn't feeling it as a birth announcement piece. And I suppose it's because as I got to know my goddaughter, the dragons just didn't fit her. She's a goofball, absolutely gorgeous little kid. She's been through some health issues of her own over the past couple years, but she's made it through and she's doing well. And I think I just needed something a little more colorful and a little less serious for her. So I follow Fuzzy Fox Designs, Rachel James out of Australia, on Instagram. And last year, I guess it was the end of 2018 and then all of last year, she released a stitch along called Magical Mini Monsters, or Magic Mini Monsters. And I don't do well with sales. I mean, God only knows when I'm on my own program, as the old football coach who used to work at UMass would say. When I'm on my own program, I don't even get things done. So I'm really bad about stitch-alongs, and I think it's because I just don't, I'm not structured enough to, okay, I've got this page of the pattern, this is for this month, I'm going to stitch on this, because I usually don't monogamously stitch. The pieces for Ms. Powers and Mr. Wagner, the only two I've ever stitched in almost 30 years monogamously. So I think as a rule I don't do well with stitch-alongs, but about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Fuzzy Fox Designs released the entire pattern. Because I guess last December was the last part of the stitch along, so she put it all together in one pattern. So I'm going to do the Magic Mini Monsters for Cecilia Joy and just put her birth announcement information on it. I am stitching this on 14 count Baroque from Picture This Plus, or I guess they just changed the name, didn't they? It's now Hanging Thread. I'm never going to be able to remember to call it Hanging Thread. It's always going to be Picture This Plus to me. But anyway, this is 14 count Baroque, and it's perfect for this piece. It's dusty rose and teal. It's another fat half, another piece of fabric I have to wrangle. But, you know, better to have too much fabric so that your framers can easily work with framing your piece than to not have enough. That's the way I've always, I mean, if I have bigger borders than I need, that's fine, because, you know, my framers can handle it better when there's more to work with than if you don't give them enough. And I'm never going to have that panic moment where I'm going to go, oh my God, it's close to the edge and I'm going to run out of fabric. It's just, you know, copious amounts of fabric to try to wrangle. So the center of it says Magic Mini Monsters, and then you start putting in the monsters all around the title of the piece. So I haven't gotten much done. I've just gotten the last little bit of the word monsters and the exclamation point. I am really loving these colors together so far, and the fabric is fantastic. I don't know. This is the Baroque colorway, and it's beautiful. And I'm feeling this one. I'm feeling this one fits CJ better than the dragons. And, you know, maybe that just sometimes happens when you stitch a gift for someone. You want it to be representative of who they are. So there's what I've done. I plan to, in the next few weeks, at least get the center title done. I would show you a picture of it, but all I have is the pattern printed out. I don't have the actual final project picture printed out, so I'll try to remember to print that next time I show this and show you, because it's so cute. It's just a bunch of adorable little monsters that wouldn't scare anyone. Cuteness out the wazoo. And if you've seen Fuzzy Fox Designs, her patterns are just adorable anyway. So that one is going to be in my rotation for, not for her birthday this year, but maybe by the time she's 10. I can't even. And this next one I actually started in 2018, shortly after I lost my job. I had forgotten that I had this in my stash, and I was going through. The fabric is very simple and plain. It was a piece that I actually bought when I was in the middle of my dyeing, my fabric dyeing, because I thought I would cut it up and dye it, but then it turned out to be the perfect piece of fabric for this pattern. This one is one that I'm making for myself. To be honest, in 27 years of stitching, I only have 4, well, technically 3.5 pieces, because one of them is a little tiny thing that I whipped up in about 10 minutes that just says, God blesses this kitchen, but he doesn't clean it. So there's only been technically 3.5 pieces I have kept for myself, and everything else has been for gifts. And it's starting with the very first piece I ever stitched. So this one is mine. Nobody else gets their mitts on this one. And if this ends up in a thrift store after I am dead, I will come back and haunt my niece and nephew. This stuff ain't ending up in a thrift store being on sale for like $1.50. Nope, nope, nope. I will come back and whoop their butts if that happens. This is quite possibly one of my favorite Karen Klubas, although I'm trying not to get enabled to do the seasonal Quaker series that she put out. This is an old pattern from 2010, A Tree by Itself. Now, I'm stitching this one as a tribute to my father because he worked in the paper industry for 42 years. And not to crib from Stephanie and sound like I'm trying to rip her off, but my father was into responsible forestry and recycling and responsible paper practices long before it became a mandate, long before everybody thought that paper was the enemy. And speaking of, I find it very interesting that now it's like, now all of a sudden with COVID, it's like, oh, your reusable bags are so gross and germy. Well, duh, but use paper. Paper is recyclable and renewable. It's like, hello. That was what my father was preaching my whole life. So trees are very much the lifeblood of our family. I was blessed to be able to have a stay-at-home mom. Although she had the harder job because she could never get away from us kids. At least my dad could escape to the office for 8 hours a day if we were being real brats. My poor mom was just stuck, so she had the harder job anyway. But, trees put braces on our teeth, put us through college, gave us both beautiful weddings, and the mill that my father worked for made corrugated linerboard for cardboard boxes. So if you ever look at the edge of a cardboard box and you see that little wavy center part, that's what they made, but they did have affiliates that made other kinds of paper. So this is a tribute to my father, but this is going on my wall. It's really in my wheelhouse because I love stitching geometric patterns. Because they're easier to fix. If you make a mistake and it doesn't end up symmetrical, you're not going anywhere until you fix it. This is what I've gotten done so far, plus a little bit of writing going over onto the other side of the fabric. This is just a 28 count antique white Lugana that, like I said, I bought it to dye it, but then I was like, you know what? I feel like crap. I'm going to start something new. So I kitted it up. I had most of the threads. It's got... Let me see if I can show this without showing the pattern, because that's a no-no. But if you can see the list of threads, it's quite a long list. The nice thing about her patterns is this pattern, when it's finished, it's 15 pages. So, but you can see how many different threads it takes. And you can see the layout. It's 5 pages across and 3 down. So it's going to be massive. It's, with the 3-inch border all the way around, it is 27 by 25, which is going to take up quite a big chunk of this fabric. I can't say I have a favorite tree, honestly. Yeah, because every one I've stitched has become my favorite. I think I have a favorite until I stitch the next one. Now, this particular tree was a complete and utter pain in the ass. It doesn't look like it's all that complicated because it's just a bunch of connected squares. But I had to rip that one out like 3 times. It was the biggest pain in the ass. That one is not my favorite, but I think I kind of am going to like this one. It finishes on the next page over, on page 6. I kind of like the Art Deco look of that one, like the 1920s look. This is the end of, or this is the beginning of page 4 here, where I've got that little half of the tree. And the only reason I haven't worked on this one in a while is because I need to order some thread. And I would have just gone out to Joann's and picked it up, but yeah, damn stupid virus. I have to wait to order some. But anyway, that's going to be really... I'm going to love this one. I don't know. It's perfect. It's in my wheelhouse. It's the kind of stitching I love to do, and it makes me think of Daddy every time I stitch it. And the saying across the top is a Pueblo saying that says, hold on to what is good, even if it is a handful of earth, and hold on to what you believe, even if it is a tree which stands by itself. So, yeah, this one has a lot of sentimental, what am I trying to say? Sentimental purpose or whatever to me. So the kids better not, when I'm dead, send that to a thrift store. Like I said, I'll come back and haunt their asses. And I mean it too. I'm going to find a way back. I will find a way back, and I will, yeah. Now this next one is a fun one that I haven't worked on in a while, but I want to get back to it because it's actually a pretty quick and easy stitch. Now, I'm not sure if the friend I'm stitching this for is still into craft beers because he's doing the keto diet with his wife, and I'm not sure if you're allowed the carbs of beer when you're on that one. Probably not. But at one point, he was really into craft beers. He's one half of the Anderson Pen Company in Wisconsin, and he and his wife, until this year, because they were having some problems with their Chicago store, so they had to, she had to move down to Chicago from Appleton for a while. Until this year, they did the pen show circuit where they would get in their car and drive from Appleton, Wisconsin to LA, DC, Dallas, Baltimore, Long Island, Philadelphia, so everywhere they would end up going, he liked to try craft beers and local beers to wherever it was that they were. So this one I'm stitching for him, and it's Ink Circles 99, and it's literally 99 bottles of beer on the wall. The cool thing about this pattern is that there is a list that shows you which beers are which, the key to great beer, and it gives you which ones are which. The rows are numbered 1 through 9, and the columns are A through K, so that tells you which beers are which. Some of them you can look at and tell, but a lot of these are local craft beers from different places all over the world, so you wouldn't necessarily know. Here's what I've gotten done. I've gotten 14. So that's what, 85 bottles left. This is what I've gotten done over the past couple of years. I started this one in 2018 as well. This one is such a fun stitch, and it goes pretty quickly. It's just like everything else. I just got to have time to sit down and do it, but this is so much fun, except I do get the song in my head. Not gonna lie. I think it's a good thing that I've mostly stitched on this when my husband isn't around, because he probably would not want to get that earworm any more than I do. But you can see some of the bottles, like the one on the end here, I think is Sapporo from Japan. I can't remember if that's exactly what that is, but that's Heineken. There's a moose drool in there somewhere, which I remember my father telling me, because he used to have to go to Missoula, Montana on business trips, because they had a mill out there, and he would have to go on business trips out to Missoula, and he tried moose drool beer one time, and he said, it has chunks in it, and I'm like, that is disgusting, Dad. Of course, I didn't like beer back then anyway, but anywho. My favorite craft beer was a Minuteman Red from the Amherst Brewing Company, but it doesn't exist anymore, so I drink Palomas now. Tequila and grapefruit soda. I've moved up in the world from beer, I suppose. Now, let me see which other projects are in here. Okay, there's a couple in here that I can show you. First off, I will show you Sunny. Don't laugh. There's a very good reason I named him Sunny. Well, I guess it was late 2018 when I subscribed to the Dragon Stitchy box that came out last year. And there were all kinds of threads and goodies related to dragons. And one of the parts of the Stitchy box was this White Willow Stitching Tribal Dragon. And I'm all about the dragons. Dragons have been my thing since I read my first Anne McCaffrey novel in 3rd grade. I've always loved dragons. Good dragons, bad dragons. Just dragons. The Barcelona Dragons were my favorite world football team for a while, you know, when there was the global NFL team, Barcelona Dragons. My mother-in-law's elementary school that she worked for was the Dragons, and I did stitch a Jennifer Aikman Smith for her before she retired. So dragons, they're my thing. They're my bag. So I started this one on a piece of 32 count Lugana from Hand Dyed by Rolanda on Etsy. She doesn't name her fabrics. If I were going to name this fabric, I might have named it Neapolitan because it's got a lot of pink and brown and white. And it's got some gray and orange in it too, but it reminds me of Neapolitan ice cream. So here is Sunny. I am stitching him with Dinky Dye's Dragonfly, which is teals and pinks, hence calling him Sunny because it's the Miami Vice colorway, as I call it. It's a lot of teal and pink, which was Miami Vice colors back in the day, so he's Sunny. I'm loving seeing him come to life. I have stitched his head, as you could see, and then this swirl underneath is the one I'm working on now. This part of his, well, you can't see it the way I'm holding it. See, I'm not quite used to using an iPad yet. But this big swoop down there that's his neck, this part is what I'm working on now. So he's coming along nicely. I really like this fabric. I really like this dyer. She does a lot of just one-off dye fabric. So it's kind of nice knowing that it's a one-of-a-kind piece that not everybody else is going to be able to stitch on. There's Sunny. I'm having fun with him. I just need to get back to him. But, you know, it's funny. My husband and I were home with my in-laws over the holidays, and they had this new light, an LED light in their den, and I was like, I want one. Because it's got natural light, 5 different adjustments, 3 different types of light you can put out. So as soon as I got my temp assignment that I had before everything shut down, first thing I did was buy this light, and it is amazing. I am seeing things with my cross stitch I haven't seen before. So that's one. Then this one, I can't remember where I found it, but I absolutely fell in love with it when I saw the pattern. I think it was another Etsy purchase because I think Teresa Kogut's on Etsy. It's called Prey. And she is just gorgeous, isn't she? She is perfect. So I had this piece of fabric. This was from, well, this one was also from Etsy. Hand Dyed Happiness. I did have like a 6-month Fabric of the Month subscription from Hand Dyed Happiness. And I can't remember, did I write down the color name of this one? I might have written it on the pattern, so let me check. But this is from Hand Dyed Happiness. And it's a beautiful, yeah, I think I've got it written down here. Hand Dyed Happiness, March 2019, Fabric of the Month, Midnight Ocean Storm. But to me it looks like the sky. So this is the perfect fabric to stitch this on. Oh, I'm showing you my back. You're not going to get anything out of that. So here's what I've gotten done. Isn't that the perfect fabric for an angel? I just thought it was amazing. I was like, yep, gonna use this. Midnight Ocean Storm, but actually it looks like the sky to me. What I've stitched is I have stitched this part of her halo, the side right here, and then I did the edge of the wing, and I'm filling in the wing now. And I think I was trying to figure out what approach I wanted to take to this because, first of all, the halo, the fill-in and the halo is going to be the very last thing I stitch because of all that. All that's just fill-in. I was trying to decide if I wanted to stitch the whole wing at once or stitch the wing and go down into her neck and come up and do her face first, which is how I think I'm going to approach it. If you see that, I've got the dark brown as the edge of her wing. And so I think I'm just going to come down and stitch her face, or her neck and face next. Like I said, the internal part of the halo is going to be the very last thing I stitch. And I think what I'm going to do is, for the wing, I think I'm going to stitch each little feather individually instead of like trying to carry over all the brown, do the brown first and then the other colors, the lighter colors. I think I'm going to just stitch each feather individually. It just seems like that might be the easier approach. Of course, when I get down here as I'm doing her neck, I'll just fill in the terracotta there. But she's just beautiful. She's going to be beautiful in the colors, and she's just so serene. Something beautiful. This one is one I'm keeping as well. She's not going anywhere except to my framer so I can put her up on my wall. Because I've just come to the conclusion that not everybody gets a cross stitch from me, and some people who do don't necessarily appreciate the time it takes. I mean, the one I made for Stephanie took 4 months and 10 days of working on nothing but that one almost every day. I mean, there were times like when I was stitching the lemur in the L block. That was... My husband can tell you stories about things he heard me saying about that damn fool lemur, but, you know, I mean, with the exception of having to put it in timeout for a day or two at a time just to save my sanity, I was stitching on that piece almost every day, and I don't think people who don't do cross-stitch realize just how much time it takes, even a small piece. The one I made for Robert Wagner was the Lizzie Kate Dog Lessons for People, because he's a huge dog lover. I mean, like going way back. Though I think the only animal he loves maybe more than dogs might be horses, but I think he loves them both equally. And I had the Lizzie Kate Dog Rules for People in my stash. And just working on that one monogamously took 6 weeks, and it was primarily just stitching words. So, you know, I just have come to the conclusion that I want to make a few things for myself, because I really have so few things as evidence of me being a stitcher. And I love to give things away. This next one I'm about to show you is going to be a gift for my sister. But, you know, I just guess selfishly I want to have some things on my wall that I've done. So my sister and I are musicians. We started with piano when we were little. She went with saxophone in middle school. I went with flute. She's still into music. She doesn't perform much anymore, but I don't either, really. I mean, right now, my sum total of playing my flute is every once in a while in church, but I don't play as much as I used to because it's down to 2 sopranos in the choir. I'm one of them, so I can't abdicate my singing responsibilities to play my flute with the choir, so I don't even play my flute as much as I used to. I sing and play handbells. But my sister, she's an avid supporter of local bands in Richmond. And so music is still a very big thing to her. And I'm going to stitch this for her birthday. It's from the Stony Creek Stitching to the Music collection. And I'm going to stitch this one. I don't know how well it's going to show up. Let me see if the back page will show. Yeah, the back page is bigger. Wait a minute, let me get it in the camera. So I'm stitching this one for my sister. I'm going to leave off the bottom because the bottom's just cheesy, and I'm probably not going to put the final border around the whole thing. I am going to stitch the different music genres in the back stitch around it, leave that off in the final border. But what I love about this from a stitcher's perspective, I mean from a music perspective, it's just awesome. But from a stitcher's perspective, I love what's called a CC embroidery, where the negative space makes the image. I love that. I love that. So that's the piece, and this is what I've gotten done. I'm stitching this on 18 count Demoiselle from Picture This Plus, or hanging thread fabric, or whatever it is now. Demoiselle is a very, very, very pale pink, almost to the point of it just being an off-white piece of fabric. But I didn't want anything that was going to compete with the negative space of the image. So I wanted a really pale light piece, and this is what I've gotten done so far. You can see the treble clef has kind of taken shape. the colors are nice too. They're not ones I usually use. They're more like autumnal shades. I really like the colors in this. A lot of browns and, you know, some people might say drab colors, but I think of them as more autumnal. Because there's some orange and some like terracotta and a little bit of pale yellow and green. So it's going to be really pretty. Her birthday is September 10th, which would mean I'd have to have this done by August 10th to get it to the framers in time to get it to the UPS store to send it to her. If it doesn't happen for her birthday, it could be her Christmas present. But birthday is kind of what I'm aiming for, and depending on how long all this quarantine stuff goes on, I might have more time to get it worked on than I realized. Now, because my video has gone on almost an hour, I'm going to wrap this up, but I have one more that I want to show you. That I was going through my stash looking for something. I think I was going through my stash trying to get together all these project bags that I'm working on now, and I pulled one out because I thought it was a different piece than it was. And this is probably evidence that I have too much going on with stitching. I didn't even remember starting this piece. Apparently, I started it twice in 2018, but I haven't touched it in so long that I completely forgot that I had started it. True cross-stitch aficionados will recognize her. Mirabilia's Queen of Freedom, who Nora Corbett designed to be the follow-up to Lady of the Flag. For those of you who aren't stitchers or who aren't familiar with Mirabilia, Nora Corbett designed Lady of the Flag after 9/11 as a tribute to the fallen of 9/11. Since then, the pattern's gone out of print. It's rarer than hen's teeth. Now, I bought it after 9/11 because I am an unabashed fan of all things patriotic. And I knew someday I would want to stitch it, even though it was outside my wheelhouse at the time to start it, because it was a bit above my skill level. I have her in my stash. I haven't really worked on her. I did start her, but I think I'm going to restart her on different fabric. This gorgeous lady came from South Carolina. I remember ordering the pattern because I was ordering fabric from Stitch and Frame in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And I just saw her and I was like, you know, what the hell? I've always wanted to stitch her, so what the hell? But apparently in 2018, I started her twice. Now, the second start I had in 2018 was on this god-awful 36-count green fabric. Now, I am not knocking the dyer of the fabric because the fabric's fine, but it's just the absolute worst fabric for this piece. And I think this was the right side up. It's just not, I mean, it's a pale green and it's a perfect, it's nice dyed fabric. It's just really crappy for this piece. So a few weeks ago, I had placed a fabric order, and usually when you order hand-dyed fabrics, it takes about a month to get them in the mail because, you know, it just takes some time. Because dyers will have to dye the fabrics or whatnot. I started her because last Wednesday was when I was getting stuff together, and I was thinking I was going to do a video. I have done more in 6 days on this piece with this fabric than I did 2 years ago with 2 starts on her. So let me present to you the Queen of Freedom as she stands right now. And the fabric is awesome. It's from Fabric Flare, which is a company actually out of Ware, Massachusetts. It's only about an hour away from here, but I don't think they have retail space. I think they're just a manufacturer. It's called We the People. It's got the freaking preamble to the Constitution printed on it, folks. I mean, this is freaking awesome. And this particular piece of fabric was cut to fit Lady of the Flag, so clearly if it was cut to fit Lady of the Flag, it'll fit this one too, because Queen of Freedom is smaller, I think, just a little bit. But it's got the preamble to the Constitution printed on it, and I'm just like, pardon me, people, you usually don't hear me swear like this, but I was like, fucking A, I'm gonna start this. And I have been unable to put this down. I stitched on this for probably about 3 hours yesterday afternoon. And my husband was like, honey, don't you need a break? So you can see that that is, oh, it's going so smoothly. Now, I thought I made a mistake and was going to have to rip out all the gray coming down here, coming down this side here. But fortunately, I just could add a couple of stitches and not rip anything out. And let me see if I can show you where that is in the pattern. It's kind of this part of the fold of the flag over her lap, somewhere in there. But if I keep, I mean, I'm stitching like a banshee on this one, but it just goes to show that when you have good lighting and the perfect piece of fabric, you know, some projects just take on a life of their own. She could be my quarantine finish, depending on how long quarantine goes on. I mean, I'm stitching on her quite a bit more than I ever thought I would stitch on her. This is 32 count fabric, so it's bigger than the green fabric I was stitching on, and I have much better lighting with my new light, so I'm going to see how much I can get done today, but I think next time I shoot a video, she'll be the one I have the most progress on. But I'm having a blast stitching her now. It's just, sometimes you just got to get the right fabric, and the best lighting makes all the difference. So I'm really thrilled to be doing that one, and I'm thrilled to be stitching it on the preamble fabric. And I'm definitely going to get another piece. I saved the card from the lady online who sold me the fabric. But I'm definitely going to get another piece to do Lady of the Flag. But that just, she's going to be awesome. And she hasn't tried my patience yet. There's always time for that, though. Most pieces eventually do get into timeout at one point or another. So that's kind of where I am. I have gone on almost, 56 minutes now. So I should probably stop. I hope I haven't put too many of you to sleep or shocked you with my swearing. Trust me, it doesn't happen that often, but I had to say it. I had to say it, folks. But anyway, until next time, I wish you happy stitching and a happy life. I know things aren't happy right now, the way everything's going in society, but just try to find that happiness wherever it is. And I'll see you again soon. Bye.